Nothing works and everybody's getting poorer.
Yes.
Everybody's getting poorer financially, we're getting poorer culturally, and the quality of life is diminishing. And what's extraordinary is just how quickly it's happened. If we'd been having this discussion 10 years ago and projected what has happened in 10 years, you'd have had me sectioned. You'd have said, don't be ridiculous, that can't happen here. But it has happened. And the thing about reform, and I'll tell you why I think we're different, is we basically all come from the world of business. We've all been around the block a few times. We've made mistakes, we've learnt from them. But most importantly of all, we're brave. And we have a strong conviction about our policies, about what needs to be done, and we've got the courage to tell it as it is.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Great, fantastic. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming. It's good to talk to you. I think
exciting times.
Well, I think I'm a potential reform voter for you.
Only potential. What's happened? I thought, I thought we'd convince people.
Well, listen, as I said,
we're making progress.
I'm just a normal half-wit from Bedford who owns a football team and has various interests.
I love Bedford. Know it very well. I grew up just north of Northampton and then spent 20 years near Olney, Newport Pagnell, sort of not far from Bedford.
Not far at all.
Which football team?
I bought one of the local Bedford teams. Bedford
I'm sure
FC.
One of your finest investments.
Do you know what? Actually, it's weirdly turned out okay.
Excellent.
So
it's rare in football.
Well, so we're a strange side because Bedford is, I think, we're the largest town in the country that's never had a team in the Football League. And there were two sides. There's Bedford Town, who were, when I tried to acquire them, were 8th tier, step 4 then? Yeah, step 4. And they said no. And so I acquired the 10th tier team next door, Bedford FC. We've renamed them Rail Bedford. It's all skulls and kind of an anarchist, libertarian club. But I made us the Bitcoin team because I had a Bitcoin podcast. I had the biggest one in the world.
Wow.
And so all the Bitcoiners around the world buy our gear. They all fly to Bedford, come to games. And we've just had a massive investment from the Winklevoss twins. They put in this April, they put in $4.5 million. We stuck it all in Bitcoin. Wow. We're 2.5 million quid up. Don't know if you saw the price of Bitcoin today.
I have just seen that. It's one of my regrets that I'm not a crypto man.
Well, I'm not a crypto man. I'm a Bitcoin man. I can talk to you about that later. But it's not too late. But yeah, so we've won the league 2 years in a row.
Well done. Brilliant.
We will go top of the league if we win on Saturday. Yes. And our ladies won the treble last year and they're top of the league.
Awesome.
So it's going well.
Yeah, you'll be chasing my Liverpool soon.
Well, that's the team I grew up supporting.
Oh, there you are, you see.
That's it. God, last night.
Yeah. What happened?
I thought it was going to be another 4-3. Like those old ones back. I told myself about those games.
We're patient, long-term Liverpool fans. This could be our season.
Well, I think they will win the league. We could talk about football. Let's talk about politics first, and then we'll come back to football. I think I am a potential reform voter. I'll give you the potential because I historically only ever voted Conservative. I haven't voted in the last 3 elections.
Wow.
Because I think the Conservative Party aren't particularly conservative anymore. I think they're pretty left-wing on a number of issues. I operate businesses and I find it particularly hard. It was hard under the Conservatives, getting even harder under Labour. And the only thing that interests me is complete disruption of politics, a complete sea change, a complete dismantling of the welfare state as it is. I believe we should have welfare, but I also think private education, the NHS, I think everything just needs scrapping. I think everything's fucked, to be honest.
The reality is nothing works.
Nothing works.
Nothing works, and everybody's getting poorer.
Yes.
Everybody's getting poorer financially, we're getting poorer culturally, and the quality of life is diminishing. And what's extraordinary is just how quickly it's happened. If we'd been having this discussion 10 years ago and projected what has happened in 10 years, you'd have had me sectioned. You'd have said, don't be ridiculous, that can't happen here. But it has happened. And the thing about reform, and I'll tell you why I think we're different, is we basically all come from the world of business. We've all been around the block a few times. We've made mistakes. We've learnt from them. But most importantly of all, we're brave. and we have a strong conviction about our policies, about what needs to be done, and we've got the courage to tell it as it is. And because that's upset the establishment, whether it's on issues like, we'll talk about them, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on net zero, whether it's on taxing, whether it's on actually making money is a great thing to be celebrated, all of that, the Tories have completely messed up. And in any walk of life, if you mess up, then someone's going to eat you for lunch, and that's essentially what we're doing to the two main parties.
Can reform realistically win the next election?
Yes, just literally as we're recording now, in the last couple of hours, a new poll has dropped, and we're now polling ahead of the Labour Party. You've got three parties polling in the early to mid 20% range, which basically means it's all about, I think you might have it on the screen.
Yeah, Conor, bring that up.
And that basically means, look, give or take, it's about egalite.
Right, here we go. Westminster voting intention. Con, can you click on that, show more? British electoral politics. Conservatives.
So that's showing Conservatives at 26%, down 1. Okay?
Yeah.
We're up 2 at 24, and Labour are down 2 at 23. And forget the also-rans. So, that is, in a first-past-the-post system, if there was a general election tomorrow, no one would have a clue what's going to happen. And so this is pretty remarkable. 5 months into a Labour government, they got a loveless landslide, is what I call it. They got 33% of the vote. They got 500,000 fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn, a communist, back in 2019. And yet, because of the quirks of our system, they got this huge majority, which was basically a punishment beating for the Tory party. That's what it was. And at the beginning of this year, I created a new word that I'm hoping will appear in the Oxford and Cambridge dictionaries called Starmageddon. On the 6th of January, I held a press conference and I said, this is the word.
Yeah.
And the press laughed. What I didn't realise was it would be Starmageddon on steroids. And that's what we've got. He's now the most unpopular Prime Minister so quickly since records began. And they haven't got a clue what they're doing. They've not got a single business person on the front bench, in the shadow, in the actual cabinet. And so they're making just catastrophic mistakes with a blunder budget from the lady called Rachel from Accounts.
Isn't it Rachel from Complaints?
We're not sure. It might be complaints within the accounts department, but it's clearly not Rachel from the economics department.
It was a weird one. I almost felt like they didn't. I know they won the election, but they didn't really win it. It was kind of like they got it out of I don't know, nihilism
by default.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that no one's properly analysed is that all the polls for months up until the election had Labour above 40%, and on the day they got 33%, and no one's actually said what happened. Was that the polling industry being useless? Was that the success of reform growing? What happened? And the Tories got a bit more than they were polling at. So I'm not sure I know myself, frankly.
Well, voter turnout was very low. It was just I think it was just under 60%.
Yeah. In my constituency, it was 54%.
Well, I think there was a lot of people like me who felt like I can't vote for this Conservative Party because it's not a Conservative Party. I'm not voting for socialists. And I don't think reform were enough on the radar yet for someone like me to go, okay, that's who I need to...
Yeah, and I think too many people sadly thought that a reform vote was a wasted vote. It wasn't a credible vote. What we're proving now is that, and there was a whole lot of nonsense talked through the campaign. There was a serious effort by the mainstream media to do us down. And so, in particular by the sort of the last diehard supporters of the Tory party in the name of the Daily Mail. And so... yeah, we were probably suppressed on votes by 500,000 to 1 million votes, but we've just kept on pushing. And that's the thing. When I started on this endeavour, and people thought I was completely bonkers, I always remember the words of my late uncle who said, Richard, you've got to be in the room to be in the deal. My view was you've got to be on the ballot paper. If you want to affect change, you just don't know what happens. Events devour events. And events came our way in multiple ways. And we just were just plugging away, and word spread slowly but surely. And by being at the table, then you can pick up some crumbs, and in a sense that's what we've done. But the momentum we've got since the election is remarkable. 18 months ago, we had 8,000 members. We've now got more than 100,000. We've doubled since the election. On July the 5th, no one would have thought that possible. I mean, in mid-May, everyone said we'd get no seats. Then they said, well, we might get one in Clacton, Nigel. Even the week before I won, overturning the biggest ever Conservative majority, nobody was saying that I could win that. I knew I was going to win because I was on the ground. So look, I think we're achieving great things. We've got the momentum because we're talking about the things that affect people's daily lives and that makes their life poorer and of a lower quality.
What would this translate into is the question. We don't know, but you had, was it 14% of the
We got 14% of the vote.
5 seats.
So literally as I left the office, someone said that those polls might represent 100 seats. The reason you can't actually do that is because of the power of tactical voting. So that could translate into a disastrous loss for the Labour Party, who could get as few seats as the Tories have currently got, 120, 130. If you get significant tactical voting, which you got this time around. So I think what actually happened was people said, we're done with the Tories. Where do I need to place my vote to get them out? And whether that was Labour, Lib Dem, or if they couldn't accommodate that, then Reform. And so that decimated the Tories. And what could happen, it's obviously a long way off, is that people say, well, in my constituency, I want Labour out, and therefore I've got to vote for whichever of the Conservatives or Reform has the best chance of winning in order to keep Labour out. So these are all permutations that, frankly, and we've never really had this before in politics. So actually, it's exciting. It's great for pundits and commentators and pollsters. And, it's a nightmare for us lot, actually, on the coalface.
But 14% of the vote was massive, despite only getting 5 seats. Whereas I think Lib Dems is at 12%.
They got 12%.
72 seats?
Yeah, which is about 13%.
Yeah. Which is a weird thing.
Weird, because they've never really done that before.
Yeah.
But that was because of tactical voting. People wanted the Tories out.
Would you advocate for a change?
Yeah, our policy is actually proportional representation, which is a fairer system, and it's what they've got in Wales, it's what they've got in Scotland. We might come on to that in a bit. But the reality is we have to deal with the system we've got. And so you can't be complacent. You just got to keep going. The great thing now is people can look at this sort of polling and say, well, actually, a Reform vote is a valuable vote, and I should seriously consider it. And the bottom line for someone like you is, look, if you want to save Britain, if you want to get this economy growing again, if you want to, in a sense, create a situation where hard work pays, risk-taking pays, employing people, being successful is, not only pays, but actually it's celebrated, it's appreciated, and you're not going to be taxed to high heaven, then you've got to say, here's a party that believes that. Here's a party that, like they're going to do in America, is going to slash the size of the bloated, corrupt, wasteful state. It's off the dial. And here's a party that's actually very deliberately going to create a situation of net zero immigration. That's the only net zero we want, which means that if there's a bit of tightness in the labour supply, do you know what? That's a good thing. Because when you can't afford the labour, right, you invest in capital equipment, productivity goes up, or the labour price goes up, everyone's a winner. That's the reason why in the 80s and 90s, the economy grew at 2.5% to 3.5% year in, year out. Then we got worried if it was less than 2% growth. And if it was less than 1%, we considered it a moral recession. Now, people are bringing out the champagne if you get 0.5% growth. That's not growth. It's literally a round of drinks. And so all of the policies being pursued at the moment are an absolute catastrophe. And I'm talking to a variety of business people around, and I'm telling you, we are heading towards a bad place. Jobs are being laid off every day, every week. Small businesses, hospitality, right up to the big sector, steel industries, car industries. And it's a catastrophe, and it's very sad. But this was the greatest blunder budget of all, and we're all paying the price for it.
Why did you get into this? I know a little bit about your background, but not a lot.
So look, I was very lucky. I went to great schools, and candidly, my detractors will say, well, it's right for him. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Yes, I was. but it's what you do with it that matters. And what I've done with it is I've employed thousands of people. I've built thousands of homes. I've run big businesses. I've attracted hundreds of millions of pounds of investment into the UK. And then I've got cheesed off by the way the country was being run and managed. And I've always had an interest in current affairs. I always knew that the EU was an absolute disaster. And it is, and you wait and see. You know, Germany is in recession. It's in deep trouble, more trouble than we're in. So I sort of got stuck in, and you just never quite know where it was. And I tried to help the Tory party, and they basically said thanks, but no thanks. And so one thing led to another. And I just thought, and in the theory, if the Tories had done their job properly, I could have gone back to business in 2020 and said, job done. Boris is in power, he's going to be in for 10 years, and off we go. But they blew it. And that's why it's good to have a seat at the table.
What's the reality of it becoming an MP, being in the corridors of power? Like, was it as you expected, or?
Obviously, I tried a couple of times before, unsuccessfully in December 19, and then in a by-election in Bexley, an old Sid Cup down in southeast London. But the truth is, it's really difficult, and it's really hard, particularly if you're a disruptor, because the establishment, all the consensus, they hate disruptors, whether it's in the world of politics or big business. You know, Hoover didn't exactly welcome the arrival of Dyson. And so you get a whole load of stuff thrown at you, particularly in the era of social media. And so look, it's tough. But equally, I'd say, well, if you're looking to change the way the country is run and governed and managed, then it probably should be tough. We should have that due scrutiny. And yeah, there's a bunch of tough stuff that comes with it. But
like what? What do we not see? What do we not understand?
Just the level of abuse that comes online. Actually, that's water off a duck's back.
Actually, I get that, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, so those of us in the game, that's a thing which affects one's family much more than it does me. Fortunately, because we've taken on some quite interesting issues, such as, you know, obviously Brexit was quite divisive. I mean, that's nothing compared to the divisiveness of net zero and the trans debate. So look, we've got scars on the back. That's fine. It's tough. I sort of slightly say, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but you know, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And that's true in politics. And I just think that, yeah, if we want to change the way the country's run, then we just got to put up with it, and that's fine by me. It's much tougher for women wanting to go into politics. Much tougher. I think there is a brutal level of misogyny, which unfortunately, I think, it's brilliant. There are so many female MPs in the chamber. I forget exactly what the percentage is, but it's much tougher for them.
Is it this kind of like, in some ways, do you feel like the establishment of Labour, Conservative, almost together, they don't want you being successful?
Oh, for sure. And in a sense,
is it a uniparty?
It is a uniparty because their policies are almost identical. And the way that they speak and operate, it's a bit of a cosy club. And I think that's, in a sense, if the place was working brilliantly and we were all feeling better off and the trains ran on time and you could see a GP within about 4 hours, like you can in most other developed nations around the world, certainly within a day, and you can get an operation within a month, then you might say, well, what's the problem? There's no need for anybody else.
Yeah, but none of that's true.
And you might say, well, okay, I'm paying a bit too much tax, but at least the place works. So, but none of that's true. And the opposite is happening, that we are, we're in deep trouble. Deep trouble. You're seeing real trouble in France at the moment. Their government's on a state of permanent collapse. Their economy, in terms of the debt they've got and things, I mean, that is a serious warning to us. I'm desperately worried about where our economy is going to be in 2 or 3 years' time. Desperately worried.
Yeah, I mean, I did the research. I had a look at the entire Labour front bench, and there's not a single person who has ever run a business. Yeah, I put it out as a tweet. Here we go. Did you know I was going to bring that, didn't you? Yeah, so like, I mean, if you look all the way down, it is lawyers, trade unionists, charity workers. And I was just thinking, hold on a second here. Not one of them has run a business. Not one of them has raised capital. Not one of them's had a sleepless night because they've got to pay wages or they haven't managed, the cash flows out of sync. Not one of them's been through that. Not one of them's had to sit there and watch a budget and go, how's this going to affect my business?
Yeah.
Not one of them. And I think that to me is highly concerning. But then the Conservatives is the same. I think there's two people.
It's just the same because the truth is most of them are policy wonks.
Yeah.
They go from either, from university, they either go into a union or they go into a think tank and it's nicey. And that's why you've ended up in such a pickle. And these people are not courageous in terms of some of the difficult decisions that have to be made. And so we've ended up where we are. It's just easier to write a cheque for someone else's money. I mean, at every level. I mean, the Tories were in trouble before COVID came. But what they did during COVID in terms of running the economy was just bonkers. I was worried after week 3. I said, no one's planning for the recovery. And this is absolutely nuts. So,
well, we haven't recovered still.
Correct, but we should have been planning for it. We should have been working out how to come out of it. And I was talking about Sweden and what they were doing, which was the right way to deal with the COVID crisis. So, look, we've ended up in a terrible state. And the Tories, they deserved what happened to them in terms of the way they've wasted spending, they've increased taxes, but most importantly of all, what they've done to our country in terms of immigration and the lies they told election after election after election when they said they'd bring it down to the tens of thousands. Everyone knew that was the right thing to do because guess what? We knew it worked. In the 80s, immigration was somewhere between 0 and 50,000 a year. And the numbers came out last week and they tried to fib about the numbers. The first part of the headline was net immigration to June 24 down 20%. And everyone started to run that headline. And I looked at the detail, I said, no, nonsense. You've just increased last year's by 230,000 in order to show this year's as a reduction. But actually, compared to what you said last year, it was an increase.
Can you bring up that Matt Goodwin chart? Yeah, we had this earlier. So this was interesting. I thought it was quite funny just that it was 1984 where things changed. I thought that was quite ironic, really. But
those are net numbers. If you look at that chart, and if people can see it, what it really shows is until about 1990, there was actually net emigration since the war. Net emigration, okay? And there we are. In the 80s, we were give or take, plus or minus, net 20 to 50,000 a year. And guess what? You could get to see a GP. Actually, you didn't have huge hospital waiting lists. And there were plenty of nurses that we'd trained ourselves. There were plenty of doctors that we'd trained ourselves.
But the issues in the NHS aren't just down to immigration.
They absolutely are.
No,
sorry, let me rephrase that. So the demand on the NHS has increased because the population's grown by 8 to 10 million in the last 15 years with no proper planning. If we'd said 15 years ago, I've got a bright idea. I want to increase the population by 10 million people. Let's have a referendum. And everyone says, yeah, great idea, lovely. And then you say, okay, so what do we need to do to accommodate that? That's called planning, right? And you could say, well, that's going to, we're only going to welcome smart, highly skilled people, and we're going to be brilliant, and we're going to be the Singapore of the West, and everything's going to work. That's one way of doing things. But if you welcome in 10 million people, primarily cheap, low-skilled labour, many of whom actually are not going to work, they're going to basically take from the system, not give to the system, you're in deep trouble at every level. And that's why the NHS has got a demand problem. And then we had the bright idea, I tell you what, let's constrain the number of doctors we train. Let's constrain the number of nurses we train. I mean, utter madness. What a great export to train more than we need and export them around the world.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
Yeah, because the NHS has other issues. Like my mum was a nurse, and through her experience, she talked about the massive increase in bureaucracy, middle management, but also there's drugs themselves have got more expensive. I think
there's multiple reasons.
There's multiple reasons. Yeah.
But when I and the waste and the mismanagement is legendary, and it's way worse than people believe. And whenever I talk about it, and I can guarantee after this podcast goes out, I will get contacted by nurses and doctors who say, "Richard, you're bang on the money," and the great thing that having been elected is we get whistleblowers come to us and they talk about the waste. They talk about the fraud and corruption that goes on in procurement in the public sector. It's off the dial. It's tens of billions of pounds every single year in every different part of it. And I regret to say that's also the case in the NHS. The PFI contracts, the way stuff is done, the way drugs are procured. The bottom line is it's a monopoly, essentially. And our policy is very different. We had a policy in the election. Sadly, healthcare wasn't really talked about enough in the election, but it was the first election where you could criticise the NHS, which we did. And even Wes Streeting, to his credit, and he does deserve some credit, he was actually prepared to say, we can't go on like this. And we said, look, if you can afford to pay a bit more, I'd like to encourage you to pay a bit more because you'll ease the pressure off the NHS. And so I'll give you basic rate tax relief if you go independent. And guess what that will do? It'll dramatically increase the size of the independent sector, much of which is not-for-profits, the Bupas of this world, the Nuffields of this world. They've got not-for-profit foundations. And that will be great in the same way, just like schooling. So the best way to improve state schooling is to ease the pressure off it by saying to anybody, if you send your child to an independent school, you'll get basic rate tax relief. You're doing us a favour. Thank you very much. Competition will grow. That's a good thing. Everyone will perform better. Instead, Labour have put VAT on school fees. 50 to 100,000 kids are going to leave the independent sector within the next year to two. The pressure will grow on the already pressured state sector, and you'll have bigger class sizes. You've got a dramatic crisis in special educational needs sector. The whole thing's utter lunacy. But that is deep socialism for you by these people. They've got no idea. So healthcare, and they get in all of these things. I know people don't like it, might feel uncomfortable, but I'm very comfortable talking about it. Money talks. And if people are making money, that's a great thing. And by the time of the next election, I want us to welcome successful people working hard, making money in whatever area, subject to, not taking the mickey to a vast level of abuse. But actually, if someone wants to set up an X-ray centre in a shopping centre and say, I can give you an X-ray and results and a consultation on it, and it's going to cost you X, but you can have it at the time of your choosing and will be on time, and it's like literally running 24/7, and all of a sudden people in that town says, great, I can get an X-ray and I'm paying my money, the cost will come down, happy days, everyone's a winner.
We have a private doctor's on the high street in Bedford called the Medic Centre. And we found out about it because I needed a doctor's appointment. It was a 3-week wait for a doctor's appointment. I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. I'll be better by then.
Well, you're either better or you're dead.
Yeah, well, I'd be dead. And somebody said, there's a private medical practice on the high street. It's £50 an appointment. A bit like, I think in Ireland, you have to pay £50 for every appointment anyway in their version of the NHS. But it's £50 for an appointment. I haven't been back to the GP since because you almost certainly can get an appointment the same day, if not the next day. They know you inside out. The facilities are incredible. They've looked after my son, they've looked after my daughter, and what it's done, it's proven that there is a cost that certain people are willing to pay, and if they're willing to pay that, there's going to have relief to the NHS.
That's the key point.
Yeah,
that's the key point. You've done a favour to the NHS.
But what needs to happen is these socialist ideas need bearing for good. We need to get rid of the politics of envy. I've tried to discuss this on Twitter, and some of the responses are insane. But for example, both my kids went into private education. I did. My dad was working class. He was an engineer. My mum was a nurse. He worked overtime to put us into a private school, and he said, do the same for your kids. And I did. The thing about the rise in the, my daughter's school fee's gone up 15.2%, right? It's gone up 50% since COVID. I can afford it, that's fine. But I know the people who are on the margins who can't have taken their kids out. And the way this is going to, the change this is going to do, which is really sad, is there are less intelligent rich people who are going to get into the private school. We're going to lose the more intelligent, like, middle class, lower middle class, and they're going to go into the bursary system, which is going to have more pressure from the working class who are trying to get their kids into the education system. It's a completely flawed policy.
And the tragedy is, what the government could have not unreasonably said to the independent sector is, look, chaps, you're doing really well in some things, like special educational needs. So in order to maintain your charitable status, we'd like a bit more help. Could you do some more? Could you come and, a bit like the original sort of ethos of the academy movement, could you come and help give more places, particularly around SEN, ease the pressure off the state system and work with us? And everyone was said, yeah, great. Instead, that politics of socialist envy says, no, ideologically, you've got something I haven't got, so I want to shut it down. Whereas actually, a society that works, an economy that works, is where you say, we want to continually get better at everything. And rather than dumbing down to the lowest common denominator, what you should be doing is say, how do I get up there? How do they achieve that? How can I do that? That's the way to growth and success. And that's what we've got to aspire for.
There will be people who maybe listen to this, though, and they're going to see you as a successful, wealthy man. They're going to look at me as somebody who's talking about having private education, private healthcare, and they're going to say, you don't understand what it's like for us. Labour's listening to us. They're helping us. They're supporting us. How do you actually communicate the long-term devastating effects of socialism to people like this?
So why has Donald Trump just won the most outstanding success in the American election? I'll tell you why. Because he built a coalition of working-class people from all sorts of different parts, all sorts of backgrounds and ethnicities and genders and skin colours and who cares what. And he said, I'm going to make you better off than Kamala Harris. That's the bottom line. And actually, Reform is the party of the low paid, the working class, because our policies, our key economic policy, where you don't pay any income tax until you're earning £20,000 as opposed to £12,500, that saves everybody £1,500 a year, right? To someone on £20,000, that is really significant. And what that also does is to those who are trapped on benefits, because it pays to stay on benefits, which are tax-free, rather than work 40 hours a week. Or you might say, well, I'll drive a taxi for 16 hours a week, claim back paying for the remaining 24 hours a week, and then and I'm earning more net at the end of the week than if I drove a taxi for 40 hours a week. That's insane. But that's what's going on all around the country. So we are the party of the working class. So to those who think that, I say to you, no. Actually, we'll make the lowest paid, the least well off, the better off, not only through that income tax policy, but the other key big thing that is destroying our industries, destroying jobs as we speak, and destroying our economy, and that's the lunacy of net zero. And I was probably one of the first high-profile people to take this on, and I just know I'm right on it. Look, climate change is real. It's gone on for millions of years. It always will. And the suggestion...
But on that point, because I've gone round and round on this one, climate has changed for years and years, but there is key scientific data that says it's accelerated since the industrial age.
I'm sorry, that is absolute nonsense. There have been multiple periods throughout history where you've had an accelerated moment, okay? Who told you that 3,000 years ago it was 1.5 to 2 degrees warmer in Yorkshire and they were growing grapes in vineyards? Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Right, there you are. You see, we've been told a whole load of BS by many people who are making a great deal of money with the vested interests ripping us off. And do you know who it affects the most? The poorest.
Of course.
The least well off.
Actually, in other countries.
Who've seen their energy bills in this country, because we've adopted it more than any other nation, they've seen their energy bills double in 5 years. And that affects the poorest than what I call the virtue signalling middle class. And the other thing about net zero, it is the most hideous, unconscionable green colonialism that we are exporting to developing nations, where they are digging out huge mines for rare earth materials and metals, using labour and child labour in the most appalling conditions. And where's the anxiety about that from these virtue signalers here? So look, and this is serious insanity. It's the greatest voluntary act of financial lunacy ever imposed on a nation by the Wallies in Westminster. And the worm is now turning. So the steel industry, I told the unions a year ago, this is going to destroy your industry. I wasn't allowed to go and speak to them down at Port Talbot because the unions were tied into the Labour Party. A year later, they've lost 3,000 jobs. Direct, indirect, way more. Absolutely devastating. I'm working hard now. Just only this morning, I raised a question in the chamber about British Steel in Scunthorpe. So, I understand this stuff, and I am battling and fighting for great skilled jobs in fantastic industries. And you look at the car industry. We've got Luton, not far from Bedford, right?
Yeah.
1,100 jobs.
Gone.
You know Luton, right?
Yep.
Gone. Why? Purely because of net zero. Nothing else. The car manufacturers are tearing their hair out. They've tried to do the right thing. They've tried to invest in EVs. They're all losing their shirts in that. They're all trying to row back from that. They're now going to be fined if you carry on producing combustion engine cars. So they're in the worst of all worlds, and they're losing money hand over fist, and so they're rowing back. They're rowing back here. They're rowing back in continental Europe. It's a catastrophe. And these are two great industries in the UK, and it's a disaster. And I'm absolutely determined to stop it.
I've got a great policy for you on energy. Connor, can you find that curtailing of wind power? You know the article. So I won a bet today. Last night. So there's a investor on Twitter, Mike Green. Back in, I think it was February or March, I bet him, and I gave him 5-1 odds, the Bitcoin hit $100,000 this year.
Wow.
Yep, I gave him 5-1, so he owes me 20 grand.
Wow.
And I've gone back to him today. You said, I think I'm too late on the crypto thing. Forget the crypto thing. Bitcoin's the only game in town. Everything else doesn't matter. We call them shitcoins. But I've essentially offered him another bet today. I think a Bitcoin will hit $1 million by the end of the decade. And it might come sooner. Bear with me. Yeah, because we have this madness of governments, especially these Western liberal democracies, increasing their debt. And for them, Bitcoin is just a return to the sound money. And so this here, Britain wastes enough wind generation to power 1 million homes. Okay, so they cost the country $3.5 billion a year. We're essentially producing all this energy, and then we're paying them to turn it off.
Yeah.
Do you know what they do in Texas? They plug the Bitcoin mining machines into them. They print money. So this money doesn't have to be wasted. This can go straight into the treasury.
There you are, you see. But that is the madness of it, is that we're paying people to turn off the wind turbines when it's too windy or when demand is down. And yet, when you get to areas where sometimes the wind isn't blowing and the sun doesn't shine, and sadly that's often the case in the UK, because we've got such a ludicrous energy policy, quite often we're importing 15 to 18% every day, every week of our electricity needs from overseas. So just think about what that transaction is, okay?
Yeah,
just think about that trade, right? So we're sending our money to France. They send us the electricity. We use it. Right. They've got our money. They've got our jobs. And we've stayed warm for a week. And then we've got nothing.
I understand.
It's the economics of utter insanity.
I have floodlights to put on at a football stadium, which are expensive.
Yep.
I have heating, electricity in a bar, which I own. It's gone up. It's expensive. I've got a home. I get this. Our energy prices are ridiculous.
But here's the real point, right? We're blessed with energy treasure in the form of oil, gas, shale gas, to the tune of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds or trillions of pounds. That we're the only developed nation in the world that's lucky enough to have that resource, owned by us all, it's owned by the taxpayer. And we've said, you know what? We've got all that wonderful treasure. Here's a bright idea. Let's leave it there. Let's not dig out the treasure. I'm absolutely sure if your late aunt, the last thing she said to you is, oh, by the way, I'm leaving the house to you. There's a pile of treasure under the floorboards equal to the value of the mortgage. I couldn't be bothered to take it out and pay off the mortgage. You know what you do, right? You get your screwdriver, dust off the rust, lift up the floorboards, take out the treasure, pay off the mortgage, and put the floorboards down again. And that's exactly the same with energy treasure.
And the inheritance tax.
And the inheritance tax and all that. But this is so valuable, it could pay off a big chunk of the national debt, which means you can have lower taxes, you can grow the economy, you can be competitive, and hey presto.
But what about nuclear?
Of course, nuclear. We started the whole nuclear industry, and we should be accelerating the latest nuclear technologies, the SMRs and things. We used to be good at this stuff, but sadly we just let it all go. Didn't invest in nuclear because morons like Nick Clegg said, "Oh, 2024 is too late for nuclear." When he was saying that in 2010. Well, here we are, 2024, and we're a bit short of energy, lads. And people want CO2-free energy. Well, if that's worrying you, then nuclear is the answer. By the way, here's the other myth. Mm-hmm. So 2 things. I'll ask you a question. What percentage of the atmosphere is CO2?
No idea.
Have a punt.
So nitrogen's what, 71%? Oxygen's, is it like, are you going to tell me it's like 2%?
Okay. Lads in the studio, what percentage of CO2? There you are. It's up here already. 0.04 of 1%.
Hold on, but this article said, how does it drive global warming? Okay.
It doesn't. It doesn't. That's the point. Okay? And by the way, what percentage...
Well, let's give him a chance. Let's see what he says. Hold on. Why does CO2 drive global warming when there's only 0.4% of it in the atmosphere? Earth absorbs energy from sunlight, but the surface warmth also emits energy in the form of infrared. Can we get rid of that? Just going to keep scrolling. In the form of infrared radiation. Water vapor and CO2, however, act like a cap, making it more difficult for Earth to get rid of this energy. Without gases like these to absorb the energy, our planet's average surface temperature would have been nearer 0 degrees Fahrenheit. About 99% of the atmosphere is made of oxygen and hydrogen. Of the remaining 1%, the main molecules can be absorbed infrared radiation or CO2 and water vapor because their atoms are able to vibrate in just the right way to absorb the energy that the Earth gives off. After these gases absorb the energy, they emit half back to the air, blah, blah, blah. Because of the greenhouse effect created by trace gases, the average temperature of the Earth is about 15 degrees centigrade. CO2 makes only 0.04 of the atmosphere. What's his conclusion?
Here's the point.
I think he's disagreeing with you.
He is disagreeing with it.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you look back millions of years, over those millions of years, we are getting colder. Okay, you've got different phases in that. But here's the point. What percentage of all CO2, of that 0.04%, what percentage is human-made?
I don't know the answer. I've always thought there's a better argument.
No, but I'll answer the question.
Yeah.
Somewhere between 3 and 5%.
Okay.
Okay, so we're trying to get rid of CO2, right? We're responsible for 1% of global man-made CO2 emissions. But that is only 3 to 5% of all natural CO2, which totals 0.04%. I mean, this is utter lunacy. I'll tell you what, if you're worried about sea level rise, all right, and we've got some issues with that, it'd be a hell of a lot cheaper to adapt to climate change.
Well, okay, that's a better argument.
Right? So what you say is, okay, and we've got it in my constituency, where we've got Boston and Skegness, and the sea level defences built 70 years ago, they're a bit time expired. So we've got to replace those in the next 20 years. But the IPCC says if we get to net zero tomorrow, it'll stop sea level rise. Have a guess. How long will it take for the sea level to stop rising if we get to net zero tomorrow?
I have no idea. I'll be guessing.
Have a guess. 6 months? 5 years?
You tell me. Just tell me.
Between 200 and 1,000 years. Okay. In other words, they've not got a bloody clue. The whole thing is a guess. It's an outrage. And it so angers me that they're ripping off ordinary folk who don't know about this stuff so that they can make a bunch of money. And I sat in a dinner a few weeks back of all these people, and they're all, I was the bogeyman in the room.
Yeah.
And this banker in the city, he says, this is great, this is investable. I said, what about making it affordable? Oh, don't worry about that. Then some other bloke who's making a fortune advising big global institutions, he said, none of the renewable energy is investable or sustainable without subsidies. And yet you've got Ed Miliband telling us that renewable energy is cheaper and the price is going to come down. It'll never come down. I promise you, it's going up.
I'm pretty sure wind and solar, I'd have to go and dig out, because we covered this before. Wind and solar is now cheaper than...
It's not.
I don't know. Con, can you go and have a look into that? Because I'm sure we saw that previously. Look, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know. I've always felt the better argument
But this is the problem. Look, fundamentally, I don't think you can stop the power of the sun or the power of volcanoes that are the biggest cause of climate change. Much better to say, do you know what? Yes, we all want cleaner air, right? We all want cleaner rivers.
Yeah.
That's a completely different thing. So, and I love technology. I've got a Tesla. I'm lucky enough I can afford it. Good piece of kit. I'm not a petrol head. I don't like noise, right? So it's perfect for me. But it's expensive. And so you can say, yeah, we can have cleaner filters, cleaner engines, cleaner fuels. And yeah, people like
Richard,
Musk developing a piece of kit, that's great.
There's a better argument than all of this, is the fact that the UK is responsible for 1% of emissions?
No, that's not a good argument.
But
No.
yeah, I think it is, because it's what is the point of us impoverishing ourselves for net zero as 1% of emissions when the US and China and India aren't doing anything?
Okay, no, I get that, but that accepts the premise that CO2 is bad. It's not. CO2 is plant food, without which there's no photosynthesis, there's no plants. We all die. Okay, we are being lied to in the most horrific, unbelievable way, and we're just telling it as it is. And so, when we win the next election, the first thing we do is scrap net zero, which means we save tens and tens and tens of billions of pounds from ordinary people every single year. That brings your bills down. Net zero is the primary reason for the cost of living crisis. And we have to make that relationship because it's true.
Very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
I'm not sure I agree net zero is the primary cause of the cost of living crisis. I think the cost of living crisis was caused by a mass increase in borrowing, which drove inflation, which made everything more expensive. Yes, energy prices went up and fuel went up, but groceries went up as well. And
yeah, but why did groceries go up?
Well, it's all
related because of the energy cost, right?
Because of the energy cost.
Energy fuels literally everything, and businesses have to recover it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But I think the inflation issue also comes from the mass increase. It's not just from the energy prices; it's from the mass increase in the amount of money. You increase the money supply, you're going to increase. That is going to drive inflation.
There's some truth in that. That's also basic economics. If you increase the money supply, if you print money, you end up with inflation. Yeah. But the energy cost has been absolutely huge.
Sure.
So, and in a sense, from where we are today, the fastest way of bringing down the cost of living is to bring down the cost of energy because it affects everything. You've printed all this money, you can't get rid of it. It's out there.
Yeah, I need to know more on this because the most frustrating part of the climate change debate for me is that I believe the science should be easy. The science should be easy to figure this out. Yet there seems to be two schools of thought. Mm-hmm. There are certainly scientists who believe that global warming is caused by human action. There are. And there's certainly scientists who think it's bullshit, and it isn't. And trying to get to that consensus is something I think it feels like it should be something easy to do, but we can't. And I don't know why. It seems to me mad.
But why would you... There are very serious scientists who agree with me.
Yes.
I mean, literally, Nobel Prize-winning professor of physics and hundreds of other serious scientists. And why would you put everything on red when, as you've just said, right, there's two sides to the debate. But what's happened is we were basically smeared and labelled and suppressed in terms of having debate and just cancelled. Why? Follow the money. If you don't understand something, follow the money. And if you as a scientist wanted a research grant in the last 15 to 20 years, you had to toe the line. You had to buy the line and you get your research grant. And money talks. And when you let vested interests do that, it's truly shocking.
Let me ask you something. When the government says they're going to spend invest 22 billion in carbon capture, what does that mean? Where does that money go? Is this basic? Is this the fundamental basics of modern political corruption?
It sort of is. I mean, they're going to invest it in some huge caverns and facilities and technologies. And, I think it's an outrageous waste of money. I mean, it's 15 times the winter fuel allowance, just to put it in context. And will it make any difference to global climate change? Not a single iota, I believe. Absolutely zero, niente. And do you know what's really happening? Around the world, and I've been traveling a bit recently, other nations who've got energy treasure under their feet, they're extracting it as fast as they can, and they cannot believe our naive, negligent stupidity. But they're very happy to sell us their energy. They're very happy to take our jobs, very happy to take our money, but they cannot believe that the great United Kingdom is prostrating itself on this altar of net zero.
Can I ask you about a couple of other things? Really important issues for me. Okay, free speech. I don't know if I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm certainly a free speech maximalist. I'm currently, I've just been charged by the Football Association for a photo in our match programme. I was on holiday. It's provocative. I'm holding a gun, but they've charged me. And I've defended it based on, you shouldn't infringe on my free speech, but they're a private organisation. They can do as they choose. But we certainly seem to have a significant attack on free speech in this country. We don't actually really appear to have a culture of free speech. And I envy the US having a constitution that protects it. What could reform do with regards to free speech and the defence of free speech in this country?
Look, you're absolutely right. It's vital. People have literally given their lives in order that we could have a free speech democracy. And the point about free speech is, it's the right to offend.
Yes.
And if you want to live in a free speech world, then you've got to accept that also comes the right, you're probably going to be offended. What it doesn't give you the right to do is to break the law. So it doesn't give you the right to be anti-Semitic, okay? Something like that, which is breaking the law. You then say, well, who makes the laws? Well, that's what you elect people and politicians to do. So, in a sense, with free speech, you can end up going too far and breaking the law, in which case there are consequences. And something like anti-Semitism is a clearly very strong, long-standing part of the law and is utterly appalling. But then you get we've developed these non-crime hate incidents where basically some snowflake somewhere in a bedroom who doesn't get out enough is offended by something. And so makes a complaint to the local police force for whom they've got themselves in a terrible pickle because of weak leadership. And so they've ended up creating huge rafts of non-crime hate incidents and ending up going and knocking on people's doors at all times of the day and night, frankly. And it's all of that. You just scrap the whole non-crime hate incident point. That would be a very good start, a very good place.
But where do you draw the line? Because anti-Semitism is obviously it's a deep and personal issue for Jewish people, and then wider than that, other people are sympathetic to the historic plight of what happened to the Jews during World War II. But for my sister, for example, she's gay. Somebody shouting dyke at her is highly offensive to her. It's probably as offensive as anti-Semitism is to a Jewish person because it's very personal to her. At the same time, to her, I'm saying, I don't think somebody should be arrested for offending you for that. I just don't believe in hate speech laws. Where do Reform have a hard policy on what is free speech?
Where should the law be? I was one of the first people to call for what I call pro-Hamas marches to be banned. I called for it on Wednesday, October the 11th, because I knew that basically they were going to go the wrong side of the current law of the land, which is you can't be anti-Semitic and you can't incite hatred and violence. And that's what those marches do. Lots of people get trapped on them and go on them for good reasons, but they get sort of soaked into the consequences of that. So that's where I draw the line. In that, look, you can say it, but if it's in breach of the law of your elected politicians, well, then there may be consequences. So in a sense, you can still say it.
Well, hold on. When does a march become pro-Hamas and not, say, pro-Palestinian?
I'll tell you very clearly. When lots of signs are portraying pro-Hamas things, if I go up to someone, which I've been on a number of these marches, and I've gone up and says, do you condemn October the 7th? Do you condemn Hamas? you want someone else to govern Gaza? And I get abused, shouted at, ranted at. That's when you know that actually they're basically pro-Hamas. And
yeah, it's a tricky one. That's not been my experience when I've talked.
Well, I've been on a number of them, and
I have seen it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I have seen it, but I've also seen.
But the point is, look, if you create a vacuum of leadership, then bad things prevail. And at the beginning, everyone said, "Oh no, you need to let them do their bit." But actually, look what it's led to. It's led to the worst anti-Semitism that we have seen since the Second World War. Degrees of anti-Semitism on the streets of this country that, again, 2, 4, 6 years ago, you would not have believed possible. And that I'm afraid, that's because people have said, well, it's not too bad, is it? It's not everybody. Well, the truth is, it's a lot, and it's pervasive.
But, see, this is a really interesting area of conversation, because I've always felt like this whole topic of Israel and Gaza has become very binary when I've always held multiple truths at the same time, which are the attacks, the October the 7th attacks by Hamas were grotesque, indefensible. At the same time, I've also held a truth that Israel deserves the right to defend itself. I would say the defense of themselves, I think, has gone too far. I think one of the really interesting things is there's a debate about whether it's a genocide, and I think the fact that
I don't think there's a debate at all. Of course, it's not a genocide.
Well, okay, fine, but the fact that it's even a debate says something horrific's happening in there, to the point that there are professionals, professors writing.
Do you know how I proved that completely wrong?
Okay.
Because I went on the very first march on Monday, October the 9th, outside the Israeli embassies, and there were placards there saying genocide. Israel hadn't done anything. That's why that is wrong. Because, and I asked a few people that I thought I would just go and ask a few things and learn something, and I was ranted at within minutes. So I'm afraid I'm not buying it at all. It's deeply, deeply anti-Semitic, and look, it's very simple. I said in the House of Commons, it's very simple. If you want all this to stop, give the hostages back. Stop lobbing shells at a sovereign, independent nation that happens to be your neighbour. And whether it's Hamas or whether it's Hezbollah, these are terrorist groups that should not be running countries or states or whatever, or regions or whatever you want to call them. And that's how you stop the death. It's as simple as that. And it's all very well saying, you say this has got the right to defend itself, but if someone's lobbing a missile at you in their hundreds from over the border, you can't just stand there and say, well, I can only defend myself in my own sovereign territory. It doesn't work like that. You have to go and knock out the people lobbing the missiles.
I don't think that's your strongest argument. I'll tell you why. Because I don't think attending a rally on the following day, say 9th of October, that doesn't mean a genocide isn't happening. And I'm not saying a genocide is happening.
Do you think Israel is trying to wipe out a whole race of people living in Gaza?
Yes, I do. I do believe. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, then we agree to disagree. I don't. I think that's completely nonsense. This would stop the moment the hostages are released.
Yeah, but the innocent, women, children, families are being killed. Don't have any control over Hamas throwing the rockets over the border. Yet they're being killed in their thousands, tens of thousands. And so I think the point I'm trying to get to is, like, I hold multiple truths at the same time. I have right to defend yourself. I think that defense, has overstepped the mark. And I guess this is one of my big questions.
And that's the nuance. That's the nuance. What do you do when the people running the militia, the terrorist group, whatever you want to call them, when they are lobbing rockets from the roof of a hospital or the roof of a school, when their headquarters is in a bunker below a school, below a residential apartment? So that's when it gets really difficult. And you and I haven't been in those war zones, but I just come back to the very simple truth, which is, if you want this to stop, give the hostages back and stop lobbing missiles over.
But that's the only people who can stop that are Hamas, not the families and women and children and doctors who are being killed in their thousands. It's a really interesting thing that I found in politics, and you can probably educate me on here. There seems to be a very consistent view within politics of very much more to the side of defending Israel. There are exceptions. Corbyn,
you know what,
Galloway.
in this country, that's not the case. I tell you, standing up in the House of Commons and defending Israel it's the toughest thing to do, because there are banks of people in the Labour Party who are literally hissing at you.
I think that's because I think they have a sympathy to the level of devastation within Gaza. I mean, we can all see the photographs.
We all do.
We know the numbers of people
I've stood
who've been
there
killed.
and I've said to them, folks, if you want this to stop, tell them to give the hostages back. I take the point.
I don't think it's that easy, though.
Well, I take the point about Hamas, but what happens in nations where the leadership do wrong by the people? Eventually, the people rise up and get rid of the leadership, and it's really difficult when you've got a terrorist group running the place. That's the difficulty. So you've got to wipe out the terrorist group.
Yeah, but I think you can make similar arguments about Netanyahu. I mean, he's a corrupt politician. We're going down the rabbit hole. I didn't want to go down with you.
Well,
I want to talk about UK issues, but
Yeah.
I will say is that I have a massive amount of sympathy for the plight of Palestinians.
We all do.
I think they've been treated horrifically for decades. I think they've lived in essentially an open prison camp. And unfortunately, their leadership has been a terrorist organisation. So they haven't had strong leadership. But then...
But also, you've got to look at other things. We'll finish there. But, UNRWA is a corrupt organisation, right? Many of whose people clearly are actually involved with and working with people in Hamas. And I'm afraid, I think Western nations, we in a sense, in continuing to fund UNRWA and think that that's the answer, when actually lots of our humanitarian aid gets nicked by Hamas and used to build tunnels and to buy weapons and all this stuff.
This is the part on YouTube where we'll both get hammered. Very strong views people have on this. But so I want to go back to free speech, because I think it's really important. Do you believe there's people now in prison for tweets, social media posts who shouldn't be? And do you think Labour have handled this badly?
At Ledden, we built the best Bitcoin-backed loan platform in the world. Proven, trusted, growing. Ledden's proven track record speaks for itself. Visit ledden.io/Mr. Obnoxious to get started. Ledden, there is no second best. Ledden is not regulated in the United Kingdom. Any credit products or virtual asset services provided by Ledden are not subject to UK regulatory protections. Please consider the risks associated with virtual assets and consult a financial advisor before making any decisions.
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's appalling. You can commit shoplifting incidents, and you can sort of knife someone and end up with nothing happening to you, suspended sentence, caution, but one bad, stupid tweet when you're cross and angry. And because the Prime Minister wants to basically label you as far right, then essentially you've ended up the victim of two-tier justice, two-tier policing, and it's a very bad place to be. And it's part of the reason why Labour are now third in the national polls.
I think extending to that, I think one of the things that's really upset people is that someone like Hugh Edwards, who was found with horrific photos on his phone, didn't receive any form of custodial sentence. Again, people are putting tweets out. And I think that is what is causing like a populist revolt, that there is the two-tier system isn't just politics, it's a media and politics establishment. The same people who hate reform, by the way.
Yeah. It's just, it's the nature of it. So
could we constitutionally protect it here? Could we have some form of constitution? Is that something our country could have?
I think we should talk about it. But in a sense, it was working quite well. It was working very well. But it's actually, I think it's in particular this government, and has got itself into a terrible pickle on this issue. So, we could look at a constitution. I mean, but equally, we sort of have got into a real pickle on all of this stuff.
How?
Well, I think weak leadership, and part of our strength in one sense is having an unwritten constitution. And that worked well for centuries. So you can argue this every which way, but we're subject to the rules of a political foreign court, the European Convention on Human Rights. Well-intentioned when it set up, but that was 70 years ago. And most institutions that you set up 70 years ago probably need a bit of refreshing, bit of refining, bit of updating. Otherwise, people who make money out of it, the lawyers, will take the mickey. And we then put it all in, we sort of created the Human Rights Act. Again, well-intentioned, but it's been abused by the lawyers and a bunch of others, vested interests, making a great deal of money on it. Then we've talked about a Bill of Rights, and we've just all ended up in a complete pickle about all of this. And the point is that before any of that, we were doing much better. But we weren't wasting our money and our time and effort on this stuff. We were growing, we were getting better off. And I just think stop overcomplicating things. I don't want to regulate for regulation's sake. Sure. I really don't. Yeah. I hate daft regulations. It's why I want to leave the EU. I want smart, simple regulations. Get rid of a whole load of nonsense. And some of this stuff now is so bad, you can't refine it, you can't tweak it. You've got to scrap it, bin it, and start again. It's a bit like a knackered old building. Don't bother refurbishing it. It's actually more viable and better if you just demolish it and start again.
What would you do for business? Because I like I say, I have a number of businesses. I can tell you one thing I think would be great for town centres. I would get rid of business rates for all locally established businesses. I don't know if you can do this, but
you can.
I think Costa and Subway can pay business rates.
Our sort of policy, which I've been working on for ages, I mean, literally probably a decade. I read an article in the Property Week magazine nearly a decade ago saying scrap all local high street business rates and for small and medium-sized businesses and have a modest online delivery tax, give or take 3% plus or minus. Mm-hmm. And the numbers broadly offset each other. And you sort of slightly level the playing field. And that would include the Deliveroos and all of this lot. And it would also mean it would deal with a lot of the tax avoidance by the big multinationals, okay? The tech firms.
Yeah, the Amazon.
So that's again, just simplify this stuff. What you'd also do by doing that is get rid of the vast amount of valuation departments and the district valuer and all the rating assessments and all this absolute useless, unproductive garbage that I've seen and suffered and drives you mad. And just scrap it all, keep it simple. There are some countries that have a tax code of less than 500 pages. Our tax code is 20,000 pages and counting. It's about 3 or 4 times longer than the combined works of Harry Potter and a great deal less interesting.
Honestly, it sends me mad, Richard. The amount of money I spend on accountancy fees just to try and figure everything out is ridiculous. It's a burden on our business. That's money that could be
That's why you've got to simplify things. That's why you've got to make it less people paying tax. You should lift the starting point at which businesses pay corporation tax. I mean, lift it to, we had it 100 grand, but with inflation and stuff, it probably needs to be a bit more than that. Lift the VAT threshold to 150 grand. All of this stuff reduces wasteful, unproductive. Talking to an accountant, by definition, is unproductive. You're not creating anything.
Nope.
Literally nothing.
Well, if you got rid of business rates, if you raise the threshold for corporation tax and VAT, I believe they'll revitalise town centres. Because there's lots of people I know who want to start businesses because they do, and within 6 months they're closed or a year they're closed because they cannot just make it work because of the bureaucracy and the cost. I'll add another one into there. Labour's tightening of employment laws, I think, is an absolute disaster. Absolute disaster. It's going to make it even more difficult because you now are giving full employment rights to somebody you haven't even employed yet. You haven't even seen what they can do. I mean, you must be.
Yeah, and it is. It's a disaster. Why? Because, as we said earlier, they simply don't understand the world of business. And I know lots of people who've put on hold expansion plans, put on hold employment plans, and businesses, hospitality businesses, just this week have said to me, we're laying people off. I know pubs that have said, well, we're not going to open 2 days a week. So that impacts on part and full-time jobs. And people saying, well, it doesn't justify to open the restaurant. So the chef's gone. And this compounds.
Yeah, of course.
It's a disaster. And at the end of the day, you get the compound power of growth. So put it in simple terms, the whole EU economy and the whole US economy, about give or take 15 years ago, was about the same size. Now, the US economy is about 60% plus bigger than the same size EU economy. That's the compound power of growth. And I'm pretty sure in 2 to 3 years' time, we're going to be here. Trump's America is going to be growing at 2.5% to 3.5% a year. We're going to be flatlining at best, might be in recession, and with a big deficit. And we're going, oh, how do they do that? I wonder. Drill, baby, drill. Use your own energy. Cut rid of daft regulations. You can afford to cut taxes. You make work pay. You make risk-taking pay. And hey, presto. People will stop leaving the country, which is a massive crisis nobody dares talk about. People will come back to the place and say, yeah, the UK is a great place. London's a great place.
So who is our crack team? Obviously, you're an experienced businessman. I trust you understand business and the complexities I'm dealing with. I think Rupert Lowe's particularly impressive. Nigel is a strong leader as well. But who is our crack team? Who is our Elon? Who is our Vivek? Who's our RFK? Is that the kind of model that reform is looking to get people outside of the establishment in?
We're being approached now because we're going up in the polls.
Yes.
People can see that actually this is serious, this is credible. Nigel's now 3-1 to be the next Prime Minister. Right? Look at what those odds were 6-12 months ago. So we're getting lots of great people come to us and say, can I help? And to be honest, we're actually literally being swamped with it, which is a great place to be. And we're 3 or 4 years out from a general election. But this is what will be required. We will need the equivalent of Elon Musk's twin brother or sister to come and do that here, because the size of the state is, the waste is absolutely grotesque. The waste in net zero, that's 30-40 billion a year you could save. We shouldn't be paying voluntary bank interest on all the quantitative easing money, the printed money that the Bank of England did. That's another 30 billion a year, give or take. I said in the election, you could save 5 quid and 100 in the public sector. You just tell everybody you've got to save 5 quid and 100, like we're doing at home, like we're doing in our businesses, right? And if you don't, you're fired. That's 50 billion, give or take.
We've already balanced the budget there.
Right, so there you are, literally. And people might say this, but I actually think now, given what I've seen and learned, that 5 quid and 100, bit conservative.
Do we need to find an Elon? We've all seen the press this week. He's a rumoured support.
Look,
how real is that?
Nigel knows Elon, and I think we've got a great deal of respect. I buy his products, and he's very interested in what's going on in the UK, as is President-elect Trump. They love the UK. Elon is a fantastic proponent and supporter and defender of free speech, stood up for Alison Pearson in her challenges and travails recently. And he understands that actually, we have an incredible relationship with the US, and a successful UK will help the US. So, let's wait and see. But I haven't got the check in the pocket.
but there's the rumours are.
Yeah, but you shouldn't believe every rumour, and maybe sometimes you shouldn't believe everything you read in the Sunday Times.
But that would be very helpful to the party, because there must be strong conservatives within the Conservative Party you would love to defect and become part of reform, and that kind of funding and backing would make them take reform even more serious.
Oh, I think they're taking us very seriously, be under no illusion about that.
Yeah.
Look, every political party has to raise money. And we're a growing party, so of course we're fundraising from a variety of people, and it's always a challenge. That's the nature of it. It's obviously easier if you're the Conservative Party in government and you're lobbing out peerages and knighthoods and things. That tends to make it a bit easier. So they could find it a bit more challenging raising money, but obviously we're not in that position. And we do it because we're conviction folk, and those that support us have that conviction as well. But look, let's wait and see. People have no idea how hard it is running a political party, growing a political party, all of the stuff that comes with it. And of course we'll make mistakes.
Do you get to enjoy it?
Yeah, I love it. I'm lucky enough. I've got a whole new lease of life at the age of 60, and it's great. And, some people are thinking, I'll take the foot off the gas. I'm just warming up.
Just back to reform and the chance of winning. It has felt recently there's been just a little bit of fracturing, some kind of counter-signalling. There's been, I don't know, it doesn't feel like there's a full united front on everything.
Yeah, look, the reality is that, well, first of all, all political parties will have people with tweaks and variants of opinions. And the bigger you get, in a sense, that will grow. That's just a reality of life. And in a sense, wouldn't it be boring if we're all the same and we agreed on everything? I mean, we wouldn't even have reason to have debates and things.
Yeah.
So, look, we've obviously had a couple of issues that people listening and watching may be well aware of. You know, some people were cross with me because of what I said on a Camilla Tominey interview. I didn't resign from
What did you say? I didn't see that.
So that was where, I said that that Stephen Yaxley Lennon, that I was not a fan of his.
I'm not a fan.
So, I made that, and some people misinterpreted what I said. Look, you're not going to please everybody. But it's funny, isn't it? Our membership has soared since I said that.
Yeah.
Our polling is soaring since I said that, because we're serious people running a serious political party, and we believe we are the only people with the ability to save this country. And so, that's an issue. Obviously, it's regrettable that, Ben Habib, who I think has been on your podcast, and, I've worked closely with, I first met Ben 20 plus years ago in the property world. So, it's very regrettable that that's ended up where it's ended up.
Can that be recovered?
Who knows? I mean, who knows? But I just think we will have our disagreements in the world, and you debate stuff, but surely it's better to do it quietly, behind closed doors. You have a discussion, you have a debate, and then the most successful teams, whether it's in business, whether it's running a charity, whether it's running a political party, you have your debate in private, and then you go out and you say, right, we've had the debate, X group has their line of the argument has won. Now we all get behind it and go for it. That's the way to keep growing and keep being successful. So that's my view.
All right. Final thing. What's more likely? Liverpool win the league or Reform win the next election?
Hopefully both. Yeah. That's the plan.
Liverpool looking good.
Liverpool are looking good, and Reform are looking good. And we're making real progress because we touch on these, and we haven't really talked enough about. I just want
is there anything I've not asked you about?
So we haven't properly talked about immigration.
Yes.
And what we do about the two elements of that. You've got the illegal and you've got the legal. And they're both in a state of crisis. Mm-hmm. So these things take courage. And there's a very simple way to stop the boats, which also stops people dying, by the way. And I have been saying for over a year.
Can't we just put the Navy out there?
Well, what we need to do is we need to pick up and take back, which we're legally entitled to do under the 1982 UN Convention of the Law of Sea. And that's an international maritime treaty. And I know exact clauses that we can do it under. France has a legal obligation to pick up and take back, but they're failing in those duties. So we should be doing it on their behalf. But that takes courage, because that doesn't suit the lovey-doveys. It doesn't suit the vested interests on this side of the channel, who are making much more money than the gangs and the people smugglers are making in continental Europe that Keir Starmer is so excised about. So, that's what we've got to do, and it would stop within 3 weeks. A variant of that worked in Australia 10 years ago, so we know it works. So that's what we should do there. We're entitled to do it, and it would actually help France as well, because it would stop the magnet factor, the pull factor. And it's what should be done in the Mediterranean, and to a degree is starting to be done in the Med.
Yep.
And that's about leadership and courage, and that's what politics is all about. With regard to legal immigration, look, my view is smart immigration, highly skilled, highly qualified people wanting to integrate in numbers that work for our economy, that can be absorbed within your public services, and people who want to speak the lingo and who recognise and accept and empathise with our fundamental foundation of Christianity as a nation and all the values that come with that. Brilliant. Welcome, come on board, get stuck in, and that is a smart immigration policy that can work. And give or take, 500,000 people leave the country every year. The truth is, we don't really know. But
how do we not know?
Well, it was proven that we don't know last week when the net immigration numbers came out, and they suddenly said that actually they'd got it wrong the previous year by a mere 230,000 people. Almost 250,000 people was the error I said to the Home Secretary the other day, I said, who's going to be held accountable for that error of almost 250,000 people? To which the answer came, no one. That's the nature of the civil service and our quangos. So we should have it's the only net zero I do want, by the way, is basically net zero immigration. But I want to train our own people. I want to get the 6 million people who are on out-of-work benefits. Sure, I want a world-leading benefits policy, welfare policy that protects the genuinely disabled who can't work, the genuinely sick and ill, and those who are genuinely out of work looking to get back into work. And we can do that. We think we're a great nation. Well, if we are, we should be able to do that. But what you can't do is go all soft on this and say, well,
You have to toughen up.
You've got to toughen up a bit. Do you know, work is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's good for your soul. It's good for your family. It's a good example to your children. It's good for your community. And therefore, it's good for the country. And if you can work, you should work.
I watched that Dispatches episode, and I know there's some challenges to some of the information, the data in it, but I'm pretty much, I think it's true that it was 8 to 9 million unemployed.
So that's economically inactive.
Yeah, economically inactive.
That's different to the number that are on out-of-work benefits.
But we have net migration is up for people filling in jobs that other people could be doing.
So we were told, you see. We've been lied to by the politicians. Well, let me tell you, we've been lied to by the institutions and the establishment who said that immigration's good for us. And then the OBR had to admit that just before the budget, I'm so sorry, chaps. Let's be honest with you now. Cheap, low-skilled immigration never contribute more than they take out, having come here. So the great lie has been exposed that large numbers of net immigration makes us better off. It doesn't. If there's skill shortages, well, yes, you can fill them temporarily whilst you realise you've messed up because you haven't trained up enough of your own people. So we need to motivate those people back into work. And I touched on earlier about the quickest way to do that is let money talk. But also you've got to toughen up. I mean, the idea that you can have online assessments where the assessor is paid more on the basis of the number of people that he or she assesses in the day. So guess what? Just tick, tick, tick. I get more assessed. I put more on benefits. I get paid more. Money talks. Not rocket science. Every single assessment should be in a job centre, face-to-face, checking out whether or not you're telling the truth. And I know this will upset people, but I might as well carry on. Look, serious mental health is a horrific condition, right? We all understand that. But what I call snowflake mental health, I've had a bad weekend. I've got issues. That's the new version of back pain from people who were skiving off work in the 80s and 90s. And look, I repeat, serious mental health is horrific, but life is not ideal. It's not perfect. And people have got to toughen up and take the knocks. And that's what we've got to educate our young people and our children.
Look, I agree with you on that. I have had serious mental health issues about 11, 12 years ago when I got divorced. The best thing for me, one of the best things, I would say, it was exercising, going back to work, having something to do, having a goal, so not to sit and wallow in, my own self-pity at the time when I wasn't in a good place. But I avoided medication. I used to go running every day, and then I went back to work. But I had, I think as a man, I needed to work. I needed goals. I needed to feel like I was being productive. If I hadn't have worked, if I'd just stayed at home, I think I would have got worse. And so
being busy is a good thing because you're focused on something. Hopefully you're useful, and hopefully you're achieving and feel you're achieving. And
but it means toughening up.
And that takes your mind off the difficult stuff.
Yeah.
You just push on. And you're socializing with other people. And that's a good thing because that's who we are as human creatures. So I was very lucky. I had a very tough mum who, she didn't take any nonsense, no wallowing about.
Yep.
She said, son, get up, get out and get on. And that's a motto that I subscribe to. And, life can be tough. Life can be difficult and life can be unfair. But we've just got to push on, because otherwise it's a competitive world out there and someone else is going to eat our lunch and then we all get poorer.
Well, I mean, that is happening. Okay, final question. Do you think we have a strong British culture? And I've just been with Matt Goodwin and I said, I understand what American culture is. It's a culture of freedom and it's the whole, this is America and I can succeed and I can be something. That exists. Everyone in America pretty much understands
The great
that.
American dream.
Great American dream. I can be something, I can achieve, and other people want me to achieve and be successful. But along with that culture of liberty and freedom, I struggle to, I asked my son what he thinks British culture is. What do we stand for? And he I'm not being unfair in answering. He said, well, beyond England doing well in World Cups, I don't really know what we stand for.
I wish we did do well in World Cups. Well, we're doing okay in the cricket. But
he doesn't know the misery of my childhood. But what I'm saying is I don't fully know what British culture is. I know what cultural elements we have within our society. I know what exists. I understand the countryside, and I understand our sense of humour. But I actually think we've created a culture of shame, which I think is really fucking weird, if you know what I mean.
I do. So first of all, we're a bit more understated than the Americans. But I think we did have a culture of, we're a great democracy, the mother of all democracies, that creates freedom. But we also had that British sense of fair play. Okay? And in a sense, look, we developed cricket. And the thing about cricket is it's a competitive sport. There's lots of banter at the crease, behind the wicket. But ultimately, there was that sense of fair play. When the umpire's finger goes up, you accept his judgment and off you go. And I think in a way that's been abused, and we've allowed ourselves, exactly as you've just inferred, by bad actors who've come in and created a sense, they've deliberately sought to divide and conquer, and they've sowed a sense of division and shame, and we've fallen for it because actually we haven't shown that resilience and we haven't had that strong sense of leadership. You had it 40 years ago under someone like Thatcher. Whatever you thought of her policies, she was a strong leader, no nonsense, as was someone like Churchill. But who else have we had since the Second World War? And what we've seen is that you can't be complacent. You've got to be strong on this stuff. You've got to identify the difference between right and wrong, wherever you set the line, and you've got to stick to it. And we've lost that sense. And I think culturally, we've got to turn that round. We've got to be absolutely proud. Our foundation is Christianity, the values of compassion and tolerance and fairness and forgiveness that comes with that. And you can be all faiths or no faith, but that's who we are. That's what we are. Anybody who wants to live under Sharia law, you're very welcome. That ain't happening here. Plenty of other countries you can go and enjoy that. So that's who we are. But our culture should be freedom, democracy, ambition, hard work, coupled with an umbrella of fair play.
Well, listen, look, I appreciate you coming and giving me an hour and a half of your time. It's I'll reiterate what I said at the start. I'm politically homeless. I would never vote for socialism, and I can't vote for Conservatives at the moment. I think Kemi, unfortunately, she's a nice enough person, but I think she had a chance to come in and be firm and direct, and she hasn't done that. I think it's been quite a boring start.
Well, let's remember, you see, the Conservative Party think they own the philosophy of conservatism. They don't. They've borrowed it for a couple of 100 years, but they basically abandoned it. Yes. And we've basically picked up the ball from the back of the scrum and we're running with it. And at the moment, frankly, our scrum is stronger than theirs.
Well, I can just tell you from the cohort of people I know that they are fed up of the establishment. They are fed up of politics of envy. They're fed up of high tax. They're fed up of high surveillance, constraints on business, everything feeling hard and expensive and difficult, crime being where it is, this kind of acceptance of shoplifting, of drug addicts ruining town centres. Like, I think people are just fucking sick and they want something. They don't want a reform party which is like, I don't know, kind of conservatives, what they think conservatives were. I think people want kind of a revolution, but not a bloody, like a peaceful revolution where there is demonstrable change from inside the political system. I think if reform came out with bold plans to do that, which they have done so far, I'm not saying you haven't, but I'm saying if they stick to that, I think reform has a chance. I would vote for it because I'm so sick. I've got so much contempt for the current media and political elite that I'm desperate for something different. And I know a lot of people are.
And what's exciting is that a lot of young people are.
Yes,
and
certainly.
And that is because we've got, I think, lots of young people looking around and say, who's got conviction? Who's got personality? Who actually believes in what they're saying? Not a bunch of waffle.
Does that exist within the demographics of your 100,000? Is it because I'm quite aware that, for example, the Conservative Party membership is actually it's a lot older. It's like the older people of the Conservative Party.
To be honest, I haven't got the age breakdown. All I do know is 20 years ago, the Tory Party membership was 320,000, give or take.
Yeah,
it's now give or take 120, 130,000.
So you could bypass them very soon.
So by Easter or before, we could be ahead of them. And look, all of this stuff is very exciting. And fundamentally, whether you like us or not, competition is a good thing. Mm. In a democracy, debating the difficult stuff, raising the questions is also a good thing. And whereas if you suppress debate and label and smear and cancel, we will end up in a very bad place.
All right. Well, listen, I wish you the best. Appreciate your time. I hope we do it again sometime. I'll have to do a bit more research on the net zero stuff. I'll definitely go down that rabbit hole. But I appreciate your time. Good luck. I just bold and different. We'll hear from it. Thank you to everyone for listening.